Welcome to The Art of Catholic. My name is Matthew Leonard. This is the podcast that dives into the truth, beauty, and goodness of the Catholic faith and seeks to take your practice of it to the next level. And what could be better than that? So please subscribe to the show, share it with your friends. Now, yet again, I have a very interesting show for you guys, and this episode features a returning guest who has been very popular in the past. Her name is Dr. Carrie Gress, and you may remember her from two of our outstanding books titled The Marian Option and The Anti-Mary Exposed, which is one of the best books I've read in the last few years. Now, she is joining me today to discuss her latest endeavor, which is called Theology of Home. Now, if you're a man, you still want to stick around for this. This is not a woman's only episode. It's not even like a no-cover ladies' night. In fact, I asked Carrie right off the bat why men should care about this, so listen up. What we're going to talk about is really ordered to all of us, men, women, children, and it has far-reaching implications for all of us. Now, before we jump in, I want to thank my patrons who make these episodes possible. If you would like to help out, I'd greatly appreciate it. You can support this podcast and other evangelical work that I am doing at patreon.com/Matthew Leonard. And by doing so, you get some free stuff like books and such. So please check that out. Also, if you're watching this within the first few days of it posting, you will see a link in the comments below for the National Catholic Women's Conference, at which I'm not only speaking, but I'm sponsoring it in the name of the Science of Sainthood. This is a totally free conference. So use the link below and register for that. I'll be joined by a lot of other great speakers like Teresa Tomeo, Father Timothy Gallagher, Sonia Corbett, and Father Jacques Philippe, to name a few. And if you join the conference, you're going to see the Science of Sainthood all over it. In fact, you can get totally free access to about 25 Science of Sainthood lessons right now for a couple of weeks using the scienceofsainthood.com link below or by texting the word saint to 66866 if you're in the United States. And this is a perfect opportunity in Lent or whenever to get authentic Catholic spiritual formation in a way you've likely never seen. Thousands have already been through it. The reviews are off the charts. So if you want to see it, use the scienceofsainthood.com link below, or again, text saint to 66866. Now, let's get to the interview. Carrie Gress, Dr. Carrie Gress, has a doctorate in philosophy from the Catholic University of America. She is the editor at the online women's magazine, Theology of Home. She's written for numerous publications, as well as appeared many times on radio and television. She's worked and lived in Washington, D.C., as well as Rome, and her work has been translated into 9 languages. And some of that work includes The Marian Option and The Anti-Mary Exposed, both of which she has talked about on this podcast. And what she hasn't talked about yet is the subject of our conversation today. And these are a couple of books that she has co-authored with a woman named Noelle Mering. And they are titled Theology of Home, Finding the Eternal in the Everyday, and Theology of Home, Part 2 in English, The Spiritual Act of Homemaking. So Carrie, first of all, welcome back to the Art of Catholic podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me on again. This is great. It's always fun to chat with you, Matt.
It's great to see your mug again, Carrie. We go way back, all the way back into grad school days when I first came into the church. And you are doing some amazing things in the church, and so it's great to have you here.
Oh, well, thank you.
Now, I'm going to throw this out there right off the bat, because I'm sure there's some dudes listening to this right now who are like, did he just say homemaking? Like, maybe I should tune into a different podcast somewhere.
Right.
Should men be listening to this podcast, Carrie?
Yes. Yeah. Well, why should he listen? You know, I think that's a great question, because one of the things that we have seen in our culture is that the masculine and the feminine have been really collapsed down into one thing. We're seeing really this erasing of genders. And this is, you know, as I talk about in the Anti-Mary, this is really the goal from the beginning, from the 1960s. And so we're seeing it come into fruition. But what we aren't seeing is certainly how unhappy people are, and just all of the, you know, we see these at firsthand in our lives, but these aren't talked about publicly. So one of the things that Theology of Home does, especially in Theology of Home 2, is really focuses on what does it mean to be feminine? And I think men have this desire for authentic femininity, but it's really hard for them to find. It's really hard for us to find. I think this is one of the frustrating things is it's not talked about. We're always just given this goal of be like men. And, I think my whole life has been spent sort of being told this is really should be the goal of my life. And so I don't know what the opposite is. So we have this kind of monochrome sense of culture of what it means to be human. And it's unsatisfying to men as well as women. So I think this conversation will be great with you just because it's going to highlight some of that and show, what these differences are and these distinctions are. And we've been really taught to have this knee-jerk reaction like, okay, this stuff doesn't matter, or of course women should be like men and that should be the goal of their lives. And so I think trying to go back and say, look, this is really not working for people, is a healthy thing to do. I also think men happen to live in homes, and the man
Yeah, we
cave.
do actually.
Good. I did my research then. The man cave is an important thing, but there's a lot of elements to home that are really important to men in general ways. And Theology of Home 1 really goes into that because we make this comparison between the domestic church, but also our real churches, the buildings of them, and the things that happen in them, as well as heaven. So we use this sort of understanding of transcendentals, such things like comfort and nourishment and safety. That happens in our homes, it happens in our churches, and it happens in heaven. So anyway, it's fun to see all of these elements. And I think, more than anything, what these books are doing is building up culture. We talk a lot about culture in the Catholic Church, but we don't really talk about specifics. And so that's what these books are doing, is very concrete, tangible ways, saying this is the kind of culture that we want to build. These are the ways to do it. And here's how you sort of fit yourself into it in a healthy, ordered way. So I think that if that's not interesting enough for men, then
well, I'll tell you, as a man, I mean, I have pawed through these since I'm a man. I paw through these books, and obviously these are kind of feminine books. I mean, you can see, right? It's pictures and it's all ladies and it's homemaking, all the rest of it. But these are not, it's not what it seems kind of at first blush if you were just to pick it up. There's a lot of meat on the bone in these books. And I have to, confess, I was a bit surprised actually by your move to write a book like this, because as I said, you and I have known each other for a long time, and you are an extremely sharp cookie. And the Marian option and the anti-Mary exposed, I got those right away. And at first I looked at this, I'm like, is this just some kind of a left turn, like some kind of a digression from what Carrie's been doing in the past? But in reality, it seems to me that you see this as kind of a natural progression in what it is that you were talking about in the Marian option and the anti-Mary. Am I wrong in that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. The first thing I'd like to say, though, is if you do look through those books, men are men, dads are dads in those books. That this is one of the things we laugh about. We put pictures in these books that you're not supposed to show people. Men looking competent and healthy and ordered. And,
swinging an axe, even.
We even have an axe in there. I mean, that's probably that dangerous, toxic masculinity is really included in the book. So that is definitely was an important piece of it. But yeah, these are an extension of the research that I've done, because I realized, doing all this looking into what has destroyed the culture, we didn't have generations of women sitting around reading Marx. No one was reading Margaret Sanger's books. What they're reading was magazines, and these magazines have laced within them all of this Marxist, occultish, ridiculous ideology, and it's packaged beautifully. I mean, they're gorgeous, these magazines that we've been producing in the United States for the last 50 years, and they're subsidized by the billion-dollar birth control industry and things like that. So I think I've been told over and over and again, we can't compete with those kinds of things. And, obviously we can't, because we don't have that kind of industry, that kind of money behind us. But I think if we're thoughtful about it, we can realize, like, wait a minute, we have all the answers. It's funny, I was thinking about it earlier today. It's almost like the Catholic Church has been that, really smart, awkward girl in class that she knows all the answers, but she's just too shy to put her hand up and say, I know what the answer is, and the teacher doesn't call on her. So she just sits there and she's awkward and she doesn't know what to do. And so none of that, what she has to say, gets out there. So I think that this is what we've been doing is we haven't utilized this medium at all, of telling our story with these incredible visuals in a way that people absorb, and not just, they absorb it passively, but they love it. They're really pulled into it. There's something about it that speaks to them. It connects with people in a way. We all have homes, so it's something that we all can take something from. So I think that was the goal. Was I want to start telling this story about the church and the truth about the church and the truth about happy Catholic women and families. And we have all these things that women say that they want. We just haven't told women this is how you get it, because we're afraid to. We're afraid to say, the church is the best place in the history of man for women, because then we're afraid of not, finding an objection that we won't be able to answer. But that's the truth of it. It really has been the best place for women in all of human history. So trying to convey that with really great visuals and in a way that feels fresh and smart and engaging, I think, we should be doing this all over the place. It shouldn't just be these two books that have just come out, but we should be using this kind of stuff everywhere.
Yeah. Did you use the word homemaking on purpose when you were titling the second volume? Are you going after something? I mean, you kind of have made reference to it, but you're kind of going after, it seems, something that's been stigmatized in modern culture.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, there are a few words that are kind of deemed more offensive, although now Dr. Seuss, I guess, is on that list too. But
I saw it. It's so ridiculous.
But homemaking has been a dirty word for a long time. And so, and this is the irony is, of course, is that the home industry is just booming. You've got, billions of dollars are spent on our homes. You have at least 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 home networks on television. You've got, all of these home stores. People are really into their homes, and even more so since the lockdowns. And so I think that the idea that the home sort of makes itself is a silly one. There has to be a homemaker. The home doesn't make itself; it doesn't come together. And we all want more than just the superficial, trappings. We want our home to feel like a place where we're known and loved, and there's, where we can grow, where we can be ourselves. And that's really what a homemaker can bring to all that. So yeah, we would love to rehabilitate the word and have people see it in a true light instead of just this knee-jerk reaction of, oh, I'm going to be enslaved if I'm a homemaker.
Is there a particularly Catholic view of home as opposed to even other traditions of religion, maybe even Protestantism? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a different ethos? Is it a different view that we have as Catholics?
Well, I think that the piece that we have that nobody else has is just the fact that we're so material, we're so incarnational. Stuff matters, as George Weigel says over and over again. Bread is important in our religion. Wine and water. All of those things are really important. Meals are hugely important in our culture. So, fire. All of
Candles, that. Not big fires.
Yeah, exactly. All of those things are really important, and so that's the beauty. And we really draw this out, I think, in the first book more than the second. Certainly, is this idea of how these things fit into the home and why they're important, but how they help those that live in the home. They also are part of hospitality. How we what we inculcate in the home, it gets poured out into other people who are visiting our homes. So yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said for just the material stuff. And I think in the church too, we've also taken on a lot of Protestant mores in terms of sort of feeling like material is bad and being uncomfortable with beauty, especially if it's a beauty that's expensive. Certainly, there's a distinction between luxury and beauty. Luxury is inward looking, beauty is outward looking. It pulls you out of yourself. And I think that that's an important thing to make a distinction about. But we know that, look at these beautiful churches in Europe, they're priceless. And that they were priceless even before today. They were priceless when they were being built. It took generations of people to build them. So I think that is a piece that we have really lost is we want things to happen kind of on the cheap, and we feel guilty if things are cost us something. And instead of offering something costly and beautiful to God, we sort of have this confused notion about luxury and beauty. And how to balance all of that out. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's an important piece of it too. And things don't always, to bring order into your home doesn't cost anything. If you can just get rid of the things you don't need and the trash and put things in and organize them, it really doesn't have to cost anything. So it's just a balance, I guess, of where you need to spend money, but also where you need to just use the resources that you have available to you, as through your mind and organization and whatnot too, as well.
And I think you've touched on something really kind of at the heart of what you guys are doing with these books, and that is the whole notion of beauty, because beauty is something it's necessary. And why is it necessary? Well, because God
Yeah.
is beautiful, and even in the
Right.
way that it's not that we didn't live in a regular middle class home growing up. And my parents, I remember them taking out a home equity mortgage or loan to redo the house at some point
Hmm.
and whatnot. But there was a different mentality. And you saw this particularly in our churches, right? You get rid of everything. It's kind of a
Yeah.
minimalist, just me and God kind of mentality. But from the Catholic
Hmm.
perspective, it's very much the nitty gritty of the world.
Hmm.
And God's beauty in creation lifts our hearts and minds to
Right.
Him. And there's no reason that our homes shouldn't do the same thing, because as you referenced before, the domestic church. So beauty is really kind of at the heart. And it doesn't mean, again, you have to have a gazillion dollars, and nor should you go spend a gazillion dollars probably on your
Right.
home. But
We're not
you,
recommending that.
right. And but you talk about the little things,
Mm.
in the section on hospitality, you were talking about, I think, flowers on the table and water on the bed, or milk, or dessert or whatever. But doing little things even can kind of set your home apart and make
Mhm.
it welcoming, not just for the people in your home, but for strangers
Right.
who are coming as well.
Right. No, I think it is really the little things. In fact, some of the stories in that book are based on my experiences with the Miller family, our good friends,
Yeah,
Michael and
Michael
Rebecca.
Miller has been on this podcast
Yes,
on
probably
several
several times. Right.
occasions. He's got the Moral
Yeah.
Imagination podcast. You should check that out.
Right. So Michael's family really kind of adopted me at some point when I was in graduate school. Michael and his wife were living down in Charlottesville, and I would go down on the weekends and just spend time with them. They were newlyweds and were unemployed for quite a while, so it was fantastic for me. But then more of their family came out, and they would do this great series of prayers called the Lord's Day prayers on Saturday night, and the whole family was involved. And I remember just going home on Sundays and just feeling like I knew myself better. Like there was a community that I was sort of tapped into, and even at one point, Michael's mom, who's God rest her soul. I think I had just come down for the weekend. I was really tired, and she could see that in me, and she said, you should just go take a nap. And it's 100 acres, and it's just beautiful and so peaceful. And so I went and took a nap, but it was just, I didn't have anybody in my life that made those kinds of recommendations, and so for her to be a hostess and notice that and to make that recommendation, I think has really stayed with me. As far as hospitality is about those that you're hosting, it has to be this extension of what their needs are, and instead of just what would I like them to do with me at this stage. So yeah, I think that it's a very important piece in terms of helping people know who they are.
Or even, how do I want them to see me? I think
Right.
sometimes people are coming over, you're like, we got to straighten this place up, and we got to put our
Totally.
best foot forward. And
Yeah.
we should, in a sense, put our best
Right.
foot forward. But again, it's
Right.
for them, it's not for us.
Right. But yeah, that's I think a really hard one, especially I know I went through a stage where I just didn't invite people over because it was just too hard, just getting
Yeah.
everything cleaned up and organized, and with little kids everywhere. And
Yeah.
anyway, it was just hard. So yeah, I know that there are stages too where people just are really not called to it at certain points in their life, where it's just you're exhausted from being up with nursing or with children or whatever. So then to be hosting people, you just don't have enough to pour out. And I think it's okay to say, this isn't our season. That season will come back in the future, but not right now.
You're speaking of that. You probably don't remember this, but I remember calling you. I had some question about something. This is years and years ago, but I remember calling you up and I started to ask you the question, and I could just hear it in your voice. You're just like, ah. And then you said, listen, I'm exhausted and my baby just threw up on me. I really can't talk right now. That conversation has always stuck with me. And we all get in those kinds of situations. That's not the time to be practicing hospitality. You're just trying to survive.
Oh,
And,
that's really funny.
you know,
I think I remember that.
It's an interesting question, though, because I'm sure there are some people listening to this and maybe even have gotten the books or will get the books, and they're looking and like, these are really beautiful books and they're full of
Yeah,
these gorgeous pictures. Your photographer did a great job.
yeah.
But
She
it kind
did.
of paints this ideal
Yeah.
for which we should strive. But what do you say to the people who are really just struggling to keep
Expensive.
some
Yeah.
sense of sanity in the house? I mean, I'm still trying to see the carpet through a sea of primary colored plastic, for crying out
Right.
loud. Like,
Right.
what do you
It's
do with
definitely.
that? How did we get there?
Well, I think this is one of the interesting thing about women, and is we don't buy magazines that show what it's really like because we live that. We don't really want to see that. I think that this is the beauty of, and we had this debate even when we were starting this book. What kind of pictures do we put into it? But I think there's something about the feminine soul that wants to be drawn out of herself, and she also wants to be given fresh ideas and see things in a new way. And this is why we see, all these gorgeous magazines with homes that we could never buy, or fixer-upper shows that are doing homes that we could never possibly afford. But we still love watching them because it's just fascinating to see the transformation and all of that. So that's one of the reasons why we chose to use a lot of really gorgeous homes, is we felt like there's something that you just get pulled into, that you get drawn out of yourself for. In fact, when I was in that very dark space with children throwing up on me regularly, I had this magazine subscription that my mother-in-law gave to me every year, and it was like this big treasure to spend 10 minutes just thumbing through that magazine. And it just took me out of my own life for just a few minutes, and I could think about things in a different way and not look at the sea of primary colors on the floor and whatnot. Um, so I think that there's a couple of things going on there, but I don't want to look at a book that shows as a direct reflection of my own home. I mean, enough. Like, I want to see order. I want to see inspiration. I want to see things that are very different from my life that I can aspire to and be inspired by.
It's probably kind of like one of the reasons that the Hallmark Channel is so popular, for crying out loud. I mean, everything is so pristine. Like, even when they're walking down the streets of their fictional little town, there's no
Right.
trash anywhere. And there's always these perfect light bulbs everywhere, lighting up
You
every
don't have to
romantic space.
lock their bikes up. Yeah. No one's going to
Exactly.
steal anything. Yeah. No, I think that is part of it, is that whole element of just entering into something that is very different, but being inspired by it too. So yeah, it's part of it.
What do you have to say to the idea of what happens outside of the house as it relates to what's inside of the house? So, like, there are men and women who spend most of their time outside the house. You walk through the door. What should happen at that point?
Hmm. Do you mean the men and women that are gone all day and then
Yeah,
they
the
come
men and
home?
women that are gone all day. And I realize
Yeah,
it's a pretty broad question, but
right.
do we go into a different? I know I have to go into a different mode
Hmm.
when and I work in my house. Like, my office is in my house, but I travel a fair bit, and so when I come back, I kind of have to get out of that mode I was in, and I'm re-entering this whole other world, so to
Yeah.
speak.
No, and I know that feeling too from traveling. It really is a gear shift. You sort of have to grind down to a different level altogether. Um, And actually, even leaving is hard sometimes too. Like, I joke
Truly,
about,
yeah.
when I'm leaving, I'm already exhausted because I've just arranged 5 people's lives, 6 people's lives for 3 days. So I think it's a real challenge, that balance between those different kinds of just demands on your energy and attention. But I think that we talk about in both books, the real goal is truly the family and to get everybody to heaven. So we have to be oriented to that. And I think it's so easy to sort of feel like it's the other way around, that the home's maybe sort of a hotel that serves our needs instead of vice versa, where we come home and we serve the needs of others. And that's really the goal of it, is to get our children to heaven and get ourselves to heaven. So having that orientation, I think, is really a vital one, in terms of just making the home a place where people are edified instead of, feel sort of um, neglected, or like they're in the way. I think that's a key piece too. Where, when I come home, I just want to. I'm always so happy to see everybody, so that helps a lot. But yeah, I think it could very easily transition into the sense of the home is meant to serve our needs instead of the needs of the family in general.
You wrote, as we said, a couple of other books on Our Lady, and really powerful books, and I highly recommend both of them. Um, where do you see Mary fitting into this whole theology of home? I mean, she was a
Yeah.
Jewish mother, for crying out loud. She's the mother of God. So she's
Yeah.
keeping a perfect
Right.
house right now.
Right.
But where does
Right.
she fit into this whole discussion of
Yeah.
the theology of the home?
Well, I think that this is an exciting piece and one that I was really happy to. We ventured into it a lot more in the second book, The Spiritual Art of Homemaking, because we looked in that book about this distinction between power and control, which is what the world tells women we're supposed to be or have or really strive for, versus this idea of fruitfulness. And even the word fruitfulness, like it was hard to talk about because it just feels archaic. It feels clunky. Like what does that even mean? It's very removed from people's lives and kind of their moral imagination. So we basically kind of set out this new grammar in it, to explain what fruitfulness is and why we should be paying attention to this, especially as women, because certainly power and control are not worthy goals. These are not what we should be striving for, and certainly Our Lady never strove for those things. I mean, she was the most humble woman ever. And so, in light of that, we see over and over again in Scripture how important fruit is and how important it is to be fruitful. And that doesn't just mean having children, but it also means recognizing that all women are called to spiritual motherhood. We're all called to shelter others in our lives with our bodies, with our souls, with our minds, with our hearts. This is what we do. And I think that this is a really lost piece. And so we wanted to bring that out. And so the whole second book is all about fruitfulness. If you can see, the images are, we've got figs and gardens and fruit trees and vegetables and all kinds of just fruiting plants, and flowers that really point to just how much of a fundamental piece this is in our lives, and how much we've almost overlooked it because of the fact that we, again, are focused on power and control and ambition instead of really understanding what it means to be fruitful itself. So, of course, Our Lady is the model for that, of true fruitfulness.
You have this entire kind of gardening motif that you were just talking about, and what it speaks to, at least what I was kind of drawing out of it, was that the home is something that has to be cultivated, which means, of course, it takes patience. This isn't something that happens overnight, because you're talking, in a lot of ways, you're talking about an extension of your own interior life is what's happening in your home. And we all know that the spiritual life takes time to develop and to mature, and that's reflected then in your home. So you speak some words of encouragement to people who are just trying to get going here, because it takes time, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, and I think that that's what one of the beautiful analogies in it is gardening, is that this is a long-term project. This isn't just those discrete moments when you're frustrated and you're like, I'm such a failure in parenting or, dealing with my children. But that it's a much more long-term project, and there are going to be storms and challenges, and yet keeping the eye on the longer term is an important piece of it, of this slow cultivation of it.
And it's something that transitions as your own life changes, right? I mean, you had a life before children, and then with children, and then, or if you're blessed with them, you might not ever have kids, right? And so your life is a different kind of way. But then, if you follow the normal progression and you're in this like kind of retirement or even quasi-retirement, your home's going to reflect that as well. And I would assume that the way you treat your home is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that that's the beauty, again, of the seasons of life that certainly women have. Men have it too, but in kind of a different way. And this is a response to that idea that we can't have it all, but we can have it all over this course of time. But what we're really desiring, I think, is more of God, and the more that we are cultivating that in ourselves and in our homes, I mean, that's the real secret. Sort of the secret sauce is that God comes into that, and your home you get this foretaste of heaven in it, not a foretaste of hell. And so I think that that's a key element, is recognizing that in order to be fruitful, we need to serve, and we need to give ourselves and pour ourselves out in a way that our family needs us, or those around us need us, instead of just this clinging or grabbing or trying to fill up our own desires, I think.
Just out of curiosity, it's popped into my head about tiny homes. Do you think that there's some kind of, I mean, it's always kind of vexed me why people want to live in such a confined space. Do you think there's something spiritual that kind of lays at the heart of that, or something
Yeah,
lacking spiritually maybe
right.
at the heart of that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It probably depends and varies for different people, but probably there's some element of austerity that's appealing. For some people, I know it's because they like to be able to move. I mean, they can move a tiny home pretty easily, so they like that adventure element. But there's also something to be said for everything in its place, and you don't have a toddler when you live in a tiny home. Like there's just not, that's not going to work. But if you're maybe an adult couple that's retired or, probably is a lot easier. And there's probably something appealing about that where you can't have a mess because, you can't get into the bathroom or something because everything's so small, nothing moves. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about that phenomenon. I don't think it's going to last very long. I think that and maybe those tiny homes will end up like as guest homes in the backyard of somewhere, but I just don't see. I think we have a lot of stuff, and I think those tiny homes are smaller than some people's storage units. So I think that's a real challenge just after the initial honeymoon of it.
Yeah, you kind of talked about the positive side of those things. It's movable, and you can't really maintain a lot of stuff. I was thinking in
Right.
terms of, it seems that sometimes, and I don't want to paint with too broad a brush here, but sometimes there's this move toward this because there's more of a worship of almost the earth itself. And so we
Mm,
can't consume too
yeah.
much. We don't want to take up too much
Yeah.
space here. And so we got to
Right.
declutter everything and just be our
Right.
own little thing. And
Right.
it almost feels like, in a sense, it stifles creativity
Mm,
almost. I mean, you just don't have space to breathe and to move.
yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that's part and parcel too of just the religion that we've made of the of green, climate change and all of that. I think that's where we're meant to serve the earth instead of earth serving humanity. And obviously there's got to be a healthy balance there, but it's got to be placed in a kind of order. And when people make that the highest point of their existence, then yeah, that's I think a real problem.
Yeah,
That
and again, I want to hammer on people with tiny homes, but
right, right.
I've just wondered
Yeah,
if
because
that's
there
part of the
could be a whole
mentality.
panoply of reasons why they do that. But I think it's even so much of it's just in the ethos. And again, we see this between all the virtue signaling of how it is, how we, what we do with our trash and how we deal with that. And then all of that extends so far in terms of even the LGTB movement and just the way that people are kind of groomed almost to think a certain way because of the way the ads are run and television series and movies and all of that. So yeah, there's a lot of that. I think we just pick up through osmosis.
Yeah. One of the things that kind of struck me as I was reading through this as well, and just the entire outlook of these books, talking about home so much, what came to mind was Christ's words in Matthew 8:20, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head.
Right.
And you sense this almost kind of longing, for home in the heart of Jesus. I mean, this is something, I've talked about, that Jesus kind of experienced a homelessness in his humanity. He was
Hmm.
gone from his Father. He was separated, so to speak, from his family, even though he maintained communion with them. But this the fact that Jesus makes those kinds of statements and talks about going back to his Father's house and preparing a place for us in his Father's house. And if it were not true, I wouldn't have told you. And this is our hope, to be
Right.
back in our eternal home.
Right.
It just speaks so powerfully again to what our homes are supposed to be. It's
Mhm.
more than a house. It doesn't matter if you're in an apartment or a
Right.
mansion. It doesn't matter. Home is a concept that speaks to the very core of who we are.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that that's really where the idea for this book came from initially was this desire that we all have to go home, to be in heaven with God. I don't think or a lot of people don't recognize what that really is. That's why they make their homes an idol because they want this sense of security and of sanctuary, and they expect it to come and be fulfilled in that way. But yes, the real desire, of course, is to be with God in heaven, and so I think that does motivate a lot of people. And actually, it was really fun in the second book to even talk about religious sisters and how they are this home for Christ on in the world. This real significance of virginity and of consecrated life, how they do make this home beautiful home for God. And we've got this great picture of the Norbertine sisters out in California in the middle of the book that I just love. But it just shows their beauty, and I think that that's another key element that again we've kind of washed away in terms of understanding womanhood because we just don't think it's important, and yet this is just a vital way to understand our role with God.
Carrie, man, there's so much more stuff we could talk about here, but what what do you want? First of all, let me just say this. I'm going to hold these up so people on YouTube can see them, but if you're listening to this, go check these books out, The Theology of Home, and you can find them everywhere, I'm assuming. Is there a particular place you want people to go to grab these books?
Well, you can get them at our site, theologyofhome.com, if people want them signed or personalized or whatever. But Tan Books, Amazon, wherever.
And you have a lot of other things up at theologyofhome.com as well, right?
Yep, we do. We've got rosaries and candles and rings and jewelry and posters, all kinds of great devotional items there as well.
Things to help you make that home exactly what you're talking about.
That's right, exactly.
So when someone kind of sets this book down after not pawing through it like a man does, what?
Not all men have pawned through it.
I know, just ruffians like me. But what do you want them to walk away thinking? What do you want them to do as a result?
Yeah. Well, this is a great question because I think this has been the big question from the beginning of kind of this theology of home ministry is what's the goal? I think the first thing is really to know and be affirmed in their life. That so many times we feel like I'm not doing enough outside the home. I need to get a job, or we just have this uncomfort, or I'm doing too much outside the home. And so I think that that's the first thing is being affirmed in our life as Catholic women. That's certainly the first thing. I'm having a lot of Protestants write me as well who are really enjoying it. But I think the second thing is really just the sense of we have the truth. We have these beautiful gifts and we have them because we're meant to share them. So it's not just, it's also a affirmation really that we can take these gifts that we have and then we can go out into the world with them and give them to other people in a way that's healthy, compelling, beautiful, and really joyful. So I think that that's the bigger message.
Yeah, and I also think too, just a kind of a little chaser on that, as Catholics, we can talk about the faith all day long, right? Until we're blue in the face. But going back to this idea of beauty and what our home can be, if you invite someone over to your house that's not Catholic or has no faith life at all, they come in and they see this beautiful kind of ordered, and again, it doesn't have to be the Taj Mahal, but they see something there that is obviously informing the way this house is. Mm-hmm. And it speaks to them in a way that other things just can't. Mm-hmm. And this kind of goes back to the idea of beauty, that beauty kind of goes around every argument. There's no defense against it. And so beautifying your home, not just physically, but in a spiritual way too, because it always goes together. And I just think it's a great witness. It's a great part of evangelization. And this is something that we should be doing.
Yeah. No, I think that's an excellent point, this idea of hospitality. And just a lot of times we feel nervous about it, like, well, I don't know what to say. Well, if you've got a well-ordered home and you love your children and they know God, you don't have to say very much. It just is going to kind of come out in the work, so to speak. So yeah, I think that that's a really key piece that just makes it simple, keeping evangelization simple.
Well, I thought the books were lovely. I didn't know what direction they were going to go when I first got them, and I felt almost guilty as a man. My mind. But they really are beautiful books, and as you said, they present not just women but men as being men as well, and that is something that is absolutely necessary. In fact, maybe your next book should be Theology of the Man Cave or something along those lines.
Well, it's funny. We've actually thought about doing a book on men. Sort of how do we help men be men? Because that's another thing that we've been, bashing you for so long that I think we've kind of lost that sense of how do we lift you up and help you in your vocation as well.
Nice. Well.
Yeah. So we'll see if that comes off. I don't know. I don't have a lot of time, but eventually I think we'll get there.
Well, you're too busy beautifying your home, so.
That's what I do all day long, Matt. How did you know that?
you,
All
you and me
day
both,
long.
sister.
Yeah.
Well, Carrie, it has been a pleasure to have you back on The Art of
Oh,
Catholic. I
thank
look
you.
forward to your
My
future
pleasure.
work. You're doing great stuff. These books are phenomenal. Make great Mother's Day gifts. You know, Mother's Day is
That
not that far away.
Yeah,
Uh,
wedding gifts, they're kind of hitting the whole circuit, I think, at this point. It's been
well,
fun.
that's wonderful. And again, tell us where people can find the books.
Theologyofhome.com or Tan Books also has them as well.
And then your personal website is carriegress.com, right?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Carrie with an IE, like the Scorpion song, I think.
Was that Scorpions? I don't think it
Was
was
it the
Scorpions.
Scorpions? I'm gonna have to look.
You gotta
I'm
look
gonna...
it up. I don't think it was, unless I'm thinking of a different one, but I'm seeing mullets. People with mullets saying it.
You know what?
Look
I'm
it up
looking
right
it up.
now.
I'm looking it up right
Find out who it
now
was.
because I don't want to lose my
I
80s
think they're
card.
too edgy.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh no. You know what?
Who was it?
It was Europe.
Yes. I was thinking Europa and I was like, that's not right.
No,
It
you're
was
right.
Europe.
It was Europe. Man alive. Well,
Wow. I think you're
I
losing it.
I know. Well, this is what happens when you go over 50, right? You can't even remember your
Right.
80s songs, and all of a sudden, oh
Right.
my
Well, and
goodness,
this
like
is a proud day
what's
for me.
happening?
To stump you on an 80s song.
Oh,
Proud
demons are
moment.
buying ice skates right now
Proud moment.
somewhere. Well, Carrie, God bless your family and everything that you're doing, and
Thanks.
I hope to have you back on again soon.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt.
God bless.
You too.